have been very...
Centuries, our kings and queens have been laid to
Sorry.
rest in the finest tombs.
Turn it off nicely, it's fine. Like I said, the Senegambia region, Senegal, Gambia, Mali, Ghana, parts of Nigeria have had their cultures exported very much, so people tend to know more about the dances from Senegal, the djembe drum, and stuff like that. Then, fortunately, also they, well, as a result of the unfortunate incident of the slave trade, you had a lot of that culture also exported to South America and North America to some extent. And you would find some religious cultures like the worship of the Shango, which is the god of thunder, quite prevalent in South America. And then, like I discussed with you, a bit of the Kundian dance thing. That is the map of Africa, for those of you who haven't seen it. Yeah, close your eyes. They're really closer.
No, I just forgot my contacts today, so I'm blind.
That is the map of Africa, and we will be concentrating in this region, where you have Mauritania, Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, that's the Ivory Coast, Ghana, Togo, Benin, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, and Niger. Getting closer to the map there. Now, Algeria and these other small nations up here do not belong to the ECOWAS region, that is the Economic Community for West African States. It goes right up to Cameroon in Yaoundé and comes that way. So these are more or less regarded as North African cultures. Now in the western region of Africa, we have, well, three dominant religions, Christianity, Islam, and traditional religion. And most of the countries that tend a lot towards Islam we found in the northern part of West Africa. So countries like Mali, and I'm sure everybody has heard about the big problem they have now with the Al-Qaeda insurgents, Niger, the northern part of Nigeria, a bit of Burkina Faso. Mauritania is heavily Muslim or Islamized, Senegal, and then pockets of Islam within, Chad also, within the coastal countries. So, like I said, the basic religions are Christianity, there's Islam, and the traditional religions. The languages you find there will be English for what they call the Anglophone countries, French for the Francophone, and indigenous languages, which can be quite hectic. Now, the ethnic groupings within the West African region is over 1,000. Let me go back to this map. In Nigeria, we have over 250. That means 250 different cultures, 250 distinct and different languages. You know, so you see why it's a bit difficult to focus on West Africa and try to make a lot of sense. So for me, in my work, what I've tried to do is not look at the music of the countries, but more to look at what is it in the creative philosophy that can be shared across the borders. Cameroon also has about 250 or thereabout, and I think Ghana about 100. So you see the diversity in the cultures in West Africa is quite heavy. Now, I'll go straight into why we're here. Like I said, West Africa has more to the north, the Islamized societies, and more down south you have the traditional religions and Christianity. And the distribution of instruments is also quite geographic, because right up there, I mean, if you visit the northern part of Africa, it's the Sahel region, so it's a lot of dry lands and very few trees. So what you find up in these areas will be mostly wind instruments and a lot of string instruments. But then coming down here to the coastal regions where you have lots of trees and the rainforest belt, you have lots of forests, you have lots of animals, so the instruments like the drum become prevalent around this region. But basically, the instruments, like anywhere else in the world, are classified into 4 major categories: the aerophones, the idiophones, the chordophones, and the membranophones. And like I said, in the north there is a huge predominance of the aerophonic instruments because, well, they are the Fulani tribe, or the Fula, are a nomadic tribe, and they do a lot of shifting cultivation. And because they move with their heads, they actually, now what we have is that they travel from the northern part of the country down to the south where you have better vegetation, and so that the cattle can graze properly. I'll still go into showing you pictures and explain a little bit of this, but we all understand what aerophones are. It could be a vibrating reed, it could be just blow into the hole and get the sound going. Then you have the idiophones, which starts getting a bit complex. Now, you have the struck or the plucked idiophones, that is self-sounding instruments. You have the shaken, and you have the lamellophones. Then coming down to the chordophones, you have the harps, the fiddles, the musical bows, the lyres, the zithers, and the lutes. And one which Africa has been well known for, the membranophones, is actually not so, well, maybe in the West African region you have a high rate of cultures that use different types of membrane drums. But then if you start moving further Central Africa and further down to the south, you discover that they do have membrane drums, but in most cases you find out that they don't use it so much. You know, they would have, most cultures would have a drum of sorts, but like I said, in the southern region, it's usually a ritual drum, so it's not something that you just come out and start playing. And the reason for that, from research, has been that the tribes in that southern coast of Africa have traveled all the way from the middle, central and northern Africa. So in the course of their travels, you know, taking big drums became a bit cumbersome, and because of the wars they had to get into, so they reduced it to those instruments that were sacred to them, which they needed for maintaining the balance in the society. And what they have tried to do, they have adapted to not having the drums and have taken the part the drum will play in an ensemble to their feet and their bodies. That is using their body for percussion. And in the drum family, there are basically 2 different types of drums you find. One will be a single membrane, and the second will be a double membrane. Unfortunately, the community MA students took all the other instruments there, so I couldn't get any drums, but I was able to get this one drum, which belongs to the djembe orchestra, and it's a double membrane drum. Now, in the single membrane category, you have single membrane open-ended, like your djembe drums and most of the drums that you find that are open there, and then you have the single membrane closed, and those will be like your mortar-shaped drums, you know, and usually any instrument that is closed would usually be belong to a tuned instrument family. So because the sound is regulated, it has a relative pitch. So the kind of ensemble where you find such instruments, there will be more than one of them, and they will be played like a melody instrument. Well, now further classification of the instruments, you have your purely melodic instruments, and in that category you have your horns, the marimbas, the mbiras, your the chordophones. Of course, most of the chord instruments of the string instruments are pretty much melodic. And the flutes, the horns, and all that, those are purely melodic instruments. Then also, like I said, if you come across a tuned drum roll, it will act like a melodic instrument because you are working with more than one or two different pitches at the same time. Then you have your percussive instruments, a few of which I have here. And for a long time, there has been misrepresentation of instruments to some extent. And I tell you, one of the biggest problems we are having in this day and age with regards to early research that was done in African music is the issue of terminology, you know. And that has caused a lot of problems because the terminologies that were attributed to certain processes and certain instruments or the roles of instruments in Africa came from a purely Western perspective. As we started growing and developing and going to school, we now had African ethnomusicologists who actually belong to the culture, and then started noticing that the way these things have been explained and described actually is not what it is. You know, so the drum, for instance, is not perceived in the African culture as a percussive instrument. Most times you see most Zomas, they tell you, yeah, I play percussion. Okay, good. But if you want to refer to any single membrane drum as percussive, now we have problems. Because for us, the drum sings. Unfortunately, I can use this to give an example. For us, the drum sings because every basic single membrane drum has more than one tonal level. It's got a deep tone and a high tone, which, well, when we discuss the principles of duality, I'll talk a little bit more of that. But you have an instrument that has a deep tone and a high tone. Okay? Like the slip drum here. Somewhere in between that. And if I say le lo lo le le lo le 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 lo le lo lo le le lo le 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 lo, it's not percussion, it's singing. And the way we perceive of it, the way we describe, even when you have to learn the instrument, they sing what the drum does to you. So calling the instruments like the slip drum and the membrane drum percussive, we have a bit of a problem with that. Rather, we prefer to term them mellow rhythmic instruments. So they are rhythm instruments, but have this melodic sense around it. That is why I included that there. And amongst the mellow rhythmic instruments, you have your slip drums, your membrane drums, and to some extent, the bell, when it is played like an orchestra. But we'll come to that. So these are basically the broad classifications of instrument types based on their sound quality. Now I tried to download a few photos of aerophones. This is the kakake. It's found mostly in the northern part of Africa. Like I said, most of the northern African states, which are mainly Islamic, have a lot of wind instruments. They also have drums. They also make use of drums, but it's not as predominant as it is in the southern coastal region of West Africa. Now, this OP actually comes from the southeastern part of Nigeria, and it's basically a tusk, an animal horn that is open on the side, and then you blow into it, using your lips to create your different tonal levels. Well, this is definitely from the smaller animal, and that from the bigger one. Now, the next instrument you have there is called the oja. It's a small, actually, this photo is about how big it is in real life. And it's a notched flute. It's got 2 holes on the side and 1 under. So it is held like this, and then you close that. And it can give you as many as 7, 8 tones, especially when you employ the technique of overblowing to get the tones out. And it is used in many dance music ensembles as an obbligato instrument, because basically without it, the ensemble will still sound good, but it's there to add some color and flavor to what is happening. Now, this is also from the north, the Fulani flutes. They usually play it in an ensemble of about 6, 7 flautists, and they are differently tuned. Then this Idinkatuchi horn, it's a trumpet, but it's also, well, it's called a trumpet, but it's same technique, blowing technique as that one. It's got a hole there, and then it's open at the end there. And then these are pan whistles, also from parts of Western Africa. Now, the idiophones, we have the xylophone, or marimba, as it to be called. Now, these are struck idiophones because you have to strike them to get the sound to come out of it. And they are regarded as melody instruments because it's got keys that when struck is used to produce a melody. Now the shaker, ichaka, or shekere, is actually a pure percussive instrument because it's just that one single tonal level, and it doesn't go beyond that. That, the slip drum, like you've seen here, is, well, it's got 2 lips. It's actually a log of wood that is cut and then dug out. So you can imagine the amount of work that goes into making one of these. Because while they dig out, they have to make sure that the lips have a certain interval, and usually it might be an interval of a minor and major third, but it's for a good slip drum to have good sound, it must be about a major third apart. So if while you tune, you chip off from the inside. So it's something I don't think I would like to do because it looks like it's a lot of work. Unfortunately, I'm not into instrument building, so I'd rather do the playing, let them do the building. The reason is that I don't want to share their money with them. So you have what you call division of labor. Now this is an mbira. I keep confusing the marimba and the mbira. This is a lemalophone. It's an mbira, and it's got these metal keys that are stuck out there, and they are tuned. Okay, you have some of them that actually this, strange enough, is from southeastern Nigeria, because in the southern part of Africa, you have a predominance of the mbira instruments. Zimbabwe, South Africa, and a lot of the countries around there. And there you could find some that have as many as 12, 24 keys, depending on what particular culture it is. Now this is what you call a bellaphone. It's, you see, it's a god xylophone, if I can use that. You have these gods that are under the keys, and it's open on top. So when you strike, it's actually the resonating, or the sound, or the air resonating inside these calabashes that gives it its sound. And it has this deep, watery kind of sound. It's very deep and rich and really gets to your heart. These are rattles or god shakers. Unfortunately, this one has metal under there. It has a very sharp, annoying sound. But usually what they would use to make the bottom would be calabash. But I think this is as a result of people's quest for durable material. So with that, it won't break like the calabash would break easily. And from the pictures here, you see that these ones have the calabash base. Now this is what you call ebili. It's an instrument. It's just, these are shells from a certain kind of fruit. So they're just strung together, and it gives you, this is another version of this. But whereas this is used for music making, these will be tied around the dancer's ankles to simulate, or well, to accentuate the dance movement of the dancers. And this finally here is a bell, like we have over there. Chordophones, well, I'll quickly go through this. This is a zither. This is some gold kind of chordophone. I don't have their name because I'm not very well versed with the instruments from the north. Because, I mean, it's well, it's something we'll try to look into from time to time, but not being an expert on it. Now, this instrument, which could be called a hubu in South Africa or bakwara in southern Nigeria, is an instrument that is pretty much widespread around Africa. And it's a solo instrument because most people that will play this would be maybe young boys who are going out to look after the herd. So it's your solo instrument, it's you make your music just to keep you going and to keep you occupied. And then also the women. Actually, in the southern part of Africa, it's mostly the women who are more or less experts on this because, of course, they sit at home alone and they have to find something to keep them busy. This is a goje. It's also a string instrument found in the northern part of Nigeria and also some of the northern parts of Africa. And you have some of them that have as many as 20-something strings, but basically it's the resonance comes from the big calabash down there, and then the strings are plucked. So this is just well, a small description of what kind of instrument does what and which is what. The zither, the lute, the lyre, the harp, and the bow. That's the bow, that's the harp, that's the zither, that's the lute. Is anybody missing there? Now to the membranophones. Like I said, there are quite a number of typologies of membranophones that you will find. The Dundun family, the djembe, this, like you can see, but this is actually from a djembe orchestra. So it's an instrument that I can't remember what name it's called, but it is used mostly as a pulse instrument. The role it will play in the ensemble will be a pulse instrument role. And these are the Ewe drums from Ghana. And interestingly, this is what we call the pot drum. It is usually made of clay. You have another version that's called the udu, which has become very popular for some reason, because I know that in India they have a lot of music types that make use of it. It's a pot that has got a hole there and an opening there, just like these ones. But these ones are struck with a beater, so it has this very deep sound, and it usually play also the role of a pulse instrument in an ensemble. So basically, and down here you can see that this instrument is closed at the bottom. Well, you can't see it, but the drum is closed at the bottom so that it is tuned. It's got a pitch, more or less. And then the hourglass drums, like the Dundumu or Bata drums, are called tension drums because you have these strings that run alongside it all around, and when you apply pressure with your arm, it takes the tone up, and when you release, it brings it down. So it's usually called a talking drum. So and it's got, it simulates the tonal inflection of the Yoruba people. And the way I've actually seen a video clip where somebody was trying to explain that this was a talking instrument and had to show by example. And what he did, he asked somebody in the front row to get up and bring his wristwatch, and then he called somebody else in the audience who understood the language, because it's not just about playing the instrument. You have to understand what the instrument says, even with the slip drum. So he took the wristwatch and asked the person to leave the theater. He walked out and he gave it to somebody and said, give it to anybody in the crowd. So he gave it to the person and then he started calling the man with the drum. The man walked in and he directed him from the door, told him, do this, do that, go there, move that, stop there, walk in, then and eventually he got to the person holding the wristwatch. So it is, I don't speak Yoruba, so I wouldn't understand what the drum is and what the instrument would say. But if you come to my culture, where you have the slit drums, of course, now my full name, like he just called me, is O'dyke. And if I happen to come to an occasion and I am somebody in society who are merited to be recognized, and it's a culture where this instrument is used, nobody will say, hey, O'dyke, come, you see you're here. What they will do is, the moment they see me walking in, he will go straight to the instrument. O'dyke, 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 O'dyke. Agwon Onagrika, Agwon Onagrika. Ojebeputa, Ojimaputa. So it keeps saying this thing, and like I said, it's not like, it wouldn't say, hey young man, come here, how are you doing? But there are coded texts that it will speak, and with that you know exactly what is being said. And before the advent of the cell phones and the fax machines, what happened is each culture, especially in the southeastern coast, the riverine areas, each culture would have its own slit drum that is sacred, and usually for the very big ones, because there are some of them that are like almost as tall as houses, and they build this ladder, you climb up to play it. What they will do with those ones is, if they fell an iroko tree, wherever it falls, they will dig it there. So it stays there, and that becomes its sacred home. Okay, and then they will climb up and play. So if, for instance, there is a problem within the community, all they had to do was somebody would go up there and, play, give the signal. Something is wrong, something is wrong, please everybody. And then the next village will hear that, and someone will go up and give the same signal, and within a matter of minutes, the information has passed from the first village here to the one right down there. So everybody knows that something is wrong and something is not right within the community. So that is it for this. And the Dudun drums also are used by the praise singers, like in the Oba's palace. If the Oba, that's the traditional ruler of cultures in the Yoruba land, the Oba is not somebody you see often. The Oba rarely comes out. So he stays in his chamber, he's sitting in there, and if he has any visitor, it is the court musicians that will start playing with the Dundun set, and they will start calling the name of the person who is coming. So even before the person gets to the door of the Oba's palace, the Oba already knows that such a person is coming to visit him. Now, I would like to narrow down my talk to Nigeria. This is the map of Nigeria, and it's beautifully colored, but it's not that way when you get in there. You have predominantly three major cultural groups: the Igbo, the Yoruba, and the Hausa Fulani. Now, in the northern part of Nigeria, that is from parts of Kwara up to Niger. Now, this is the same spelling with the country, but the country, that is the Francophone country, Niger. But here in Nigeria, it's called Niger, and because of the river Niger that flows that way. So, what you have here, actually from there, is more or less Muslim communities. Now, places like Kaduna, Abuja, Nasarawa, we call the Middle Belt. It's now a mix between Christianity and Islam. Then when you come to the southwest west, from Kwara State, Oyo, Ogun, Ondo, this is the Yoruba region, okay? And it's a mixture of Islam and Christianity. Now, coming down here is the south. Now in the south, we have the southeast, which is the Igbo culture, or the Igbo communities, about 4 or 5 states, and then down here you have the south-south. Like I said, there are over 250 different ethnic groups, but predominantly what you will find will be the Hausa Fulani up there, the Yorubas here, and in the southeast the Igbos and Efiks and Ibibios down there. So I want to concentrate a little bit more on Nigeria and then focus still further on the Igbo music, which is where I have done a lot of work. So like I said, the religious inclinations you find there will be Christianity, there will be Islam, and there will be the traditional religions. The dominant cultures, the Hausa Fulani up in the north, the Yorubas in the southwest, and the Igbos in the southeast and the south-south. Just a brief history, well, a brief getting to know of the Igbo man. The Igbos are very cultural people, and their culture is represented very much in the dressing. And one thing that you would always notice, or one thing that makes an Igbo man stand out, is the headgear that he puts on. And from this picture, well, it's not just the pictures I selected, but you can see that each of them have this red thing on their head. It could stand for two things. If you are a titled person, which means that you have been given a certain chieftaincy, then the custom demands that you use this red cap to say this is the kind of position you have within the society. A lot of people, a lot of young men like me now will just get the red thing and put on without having any titles. But then basically, you should say that this is who you are, this is the what you've attained in society. Now, the women folk, there's been so much acculturation that now it becomes difficult to say actually what is Igbo and what is not Igbo, because with the cross-pollination of cultures, people have now started to borrow things from different other cultures to merge to theirs. Now, one thing that you will find in the modern cosmopolitan Igbo woman will be the headgear. They have these big head things that they wrap around their heads, and you won't want to sit behind them in church because you will see nothing. You just sit there and praise the Lord. You just wave, and it stands like that. But then, more traditionally, you would have people who would plait their hairs in such beautiful ways. Unfortunately, again, it is seen as a primitive culture to plait the hair or weave it. So people would rather spend $400 buying hair that belongs to somebody they don't know, and then fitting it to theirs to look Caucasian. But basically, what if you in a traditional environment, this is the kind of dressing you would expect from the women. You know, simple, a wrap around the chest, from the younger women though, a wrap around the chest and something down there and with the beads. And in the old cultures, the old Igbo cultures, of course, when you're a little kid, you don't need clothing. You run around naked. But as you grow up and get to a certain age, you first put a piece of cloth around here to cover the vital things. Then as the person gets older, then maybe you start covering up there until adulthood. And when you start getting very old, you start taking them off again, because you start getting too disturbed with putting on things. So you see the very old men in the village, they are all moving about topless. Now the Yoruba, I think in Nigeria today, still have one of the strongest cultures, actually in the world. Because I was just watching a couple of clips from Cuba, you know, where the worship of Shango is still very strong, and they are very proud of their language, and would rather speak their language than speak English to you, if you understand. So it's something that you don't find in Igbo land. People are not so proud of, well, maybe because we lost the war or something, but now the Yoruba dressing is, I mean, the Yoruba man will always have something on his head. It doesn't matter what the occasion is, but he must have a headgear. And it ranges from headgears like that to what the man is putting on there. And they have this very flamboyant way of dressing, which you also find a bit in the north. You know, these big flowing gowns. And it also comes in very handy when they do their dances, because most of the dances flow that way. So they will grab the edges of their dresses and do that. Now the women also, like I said, you see the headgear thing. So somewhere the cultures are merged and people now use and do whatever without knowing exactly who owned what. But what you see as a traditional gele, that is called, will be something like this. This is a little bit more modern and quite flamboyant, but the women in the village who of course have to tie their hair will do something a little bit more like this that's not too flamboyant. Then the Hausa Fulani in the north, there's a very strong Arabic presence. So their dressing, their cultures tend towards the Arabic culture. Well, this is a very old picture, and you can see they have their turbans. Of course, they live in the desert area, or semi-desert area of Nigeria, so there's a lot of sand and a lot of wind, so they will usually tie these turbans to cover their nose and mouth. And then this would be a typical Fulani girl's way of dressing. Now the Fulani are nomads. It's a nomadic tribe, you know, traveling from one place to the other, and are not really Hausas. It's just that their features are close to those of the Hausas, and people tend to lump them together. But the Fulanis will tell you that they're not Hausas and that their tribe is different. You also find them in many, the Niger Republic and some other countries in Northern Africa. Now this will be a typical modern Hausa woman, because they have to make sure that the hair is covered there. And this will be what a young Hausa man in the modern day world would look like, and not necessarily dressing like the men there. Now in West Africa we have different music types. We have sacred music, which is music that is utilized by sects and cults. Now such music types, in most cases, if you don't belong to whatever sect or cult it is, the only way you come close to that kind of music is if you hear it, because most of the activities will either happen in a closed place or at night. And the only time they would usually come out in public is when they have to, when there's a funeral and a member of theirs has died, and they have to come out and bury him in their own burial rites. And in most cases, such sects and cults would carry out their activities, well, from the dead of the night, when people are all in bed, because it is expected that what they do in secrecy should not be exposed. So you have a lot of sacred music, and it is not music that people are abreast with, because it is music that is reserved specially for whatever it is that we do. Then of course you have the secular music, the event music, which is music that happens anywhere in the society at any time and could be for any occasion. And when we discuss event music, we have a classification of event music and music events. And an event music is a particular music type that marshals a particular event, while a music event is like you would have a festival where people come with their different music types and different dances, but just all woven around that particular event. Now you have the royal music for coronations of chiefs and kings and for royal processions. And in some or well, most of the cultures in Nigeria, the traditional leader of the people is not somebody that comes out often. Like I told you, the Yoruba, the Oba is rarely seen. You know, but on that occasion when he has to come out, it is a big thing and people will want to come and see him. Then in the southeastern part, one of the strong monarchies we have is the Onisha area. They have a ruler who also comes out once in a year during his festival that is called the Fala Festival, which happens when there is a new yam. The yam is a tuber, it grows under the ground, and it's like the potato, but it's much bigger. And it is representative of the fruits of the land. So when the first yams come out in the whole of the southeastern part of Nigeria, when the first yams come out, there is a specific ceremony that is performed, you know, before you can, actually it's believed that if you don't do that and eat the yam, then the next year your harvest will not be good. So everybody waits until that particular festive occasion, and when that process has taken place and the king or the chief or the ruler has eaten the first fresh yam, then people go into eating what else is left. Then you have music for healing. And healing in the sense that, well, I don't know if healing would be the right language to use, because you have, for instance, people who are mentally disturbed. When we don't have like homes where they stay. Well, we have things that look like homes, but they're actually not taken very good care of. So they have to move out and fend for themselves. And usually when they do that, they will do that with a specific type of music. And it will usually be the bell music, you know. For some strange reason, it just keeps them in check and they move in that straight line and are well coordinated and they do what they have to do and they get back. So the music in this case would not be, it will be more of therapeutic than healing. But then also you have instances where bell music is used to sedate people. I mean, somebody has a broken leg and he goes to the traditional bone mender and they don't put morphine or whatever. There is the music, actually it's some interesting area that I have tried to dabble into, you know, around music and healing, because with a small bell, there's this musician that will keep playing a particular cycle, you know, a circle actually, because it's a groove, one groove, not changing, and he keeps playing it and playing it and playing it until the person falls asleep. And I remember one of my lecturers told me of a case where a friend of his broke his leg and had to be taken to the traditional healer, the bone mender. And when they got there, they brought him in, he was in pain, shouting, screaming, and the man prepared what he needed, and this young man came with the bell and started playing the particular rhythm structure, you know, in a circle, continuous. And the guy was shouting, oh, my leg, my leg, my leg, and he kept playing it. And eventually, the man started talking less and just passed out, you know. And the guy continued with the music, so the man now came, pressed, put the splinters, tied it, did everything. When he had finished with the leg, he now asked them to hold the man down. He was still asleep then. So they held him down, and then this guy stopped playing. And after a couple of minutes, the guy came to again and started screaming because the pain of what had happened. So they had to hold him to make sure he doesn't dislocate the leg one more time. So you find instances where music is used in such ways, and even for curing madness that has been inflicted as a result of something the person has done against the community. Now there are communities where people go mad, I mean like schizophrenia, but it is as a result of what they have done in the community. You commit a crime against the land. And for such people to be healed of that schizophrenia, they will have to go through a music process where they get cleansed and become one again in the society. And then finally, you have the spiritual music for religious worship, which is different from the sects and cults. And this will also include the kind of music that is used for getting people into trances, to get them into a trance and to commune with the higher being. Now, the different genres of music you find in West Africa would include dance music ensembles, purely instrumental music ensembles. You have the praise singers like the griots and sometimes they're called the bards. Then you have the music theater, which is another very interesting concept. I've actually done a bit of work with music theater, but it is represented through the spirit manifest, like it's called masquerade. The only reason why we have a problem with the term masquerade is when you try to analyze the meaning of that word, it does not connote what the spirit manifest stands for in our societies. Because when you say he's masquerading, usually what will come to your mind will be the elites of the society who have these big ballroom parties and they wear these funny things to cover their faces and do some not very good things behind the mask. So we try to find a terminology that balances and explains the thinking or the conceptualization of the owners of the culture. Because the spirit manifest, which was formerly called masquerade, is in most cultures in the West African region, it is actually seen as representatives of the ancestry that is coming to commune with us in our present day lives. And like the myth will go, we believe that they come out of ant holes, and when they have finished communing and making sure that everything is going well in society, they go back into those ant holes. Unfortunately, again, things are not like they used to be, and a lot of religious practices were desecrated by the colonial masters, because, especially in the southeastern part of Nigeria, because they couldn't find the grip on these people. We didn't have monarchs. We didn't have any type of system that they could easily break into. So what they did was to attack the spirituality base of the community. Now you have your choral groups and the choric dance. The choric dance is a group that sing and dance. I mean, their repertoire will be singing and dancing, singing and dancing, singing and dancing. So each of their presentations will include their songs, which they will sing and do the dancing. And of course, you have your purely choral groups, which I think is a modern contraption, because there was really no use for choral groups in the old cultures, because when singing had to be done, everybody had to sing. So you didn't have people who were brought up and said, okay, these are the ones who are going to sing. Singing is communion. When you get into music making, everybody gets involved. I have time to touch on a few other things. Then you have, of course, military music that will be used to get people together and marshal them. Then you have the solo songs, like I said, the child in the bundus, in the forest, looking after the cattle. He has his small instrument and he plays his music to and for himself, or he has his flute, which he plays to and for himself. And then finally you have the children's play songs and games. These play songs and games are things, I'm sure you have them in other cultures, but these are games that at some point I tried to do a little bit of research into the meaning and how it could be used, in a classroom situation. And you discover that children start learning how to count. They start picking up some skills from those games they play, and it also gives them an opportunity to start developing their creative genius. It starts exciting their creativity in them, because